this is going to be a long story, but I feel that I need to tell people of how God has moved in our lives. We have, in the past 20 years, God has really done amazing work in our lives. And I'm just wanting to go back to 1985 when we went up to Dundee, and as a visitor to Mayena Mission, spent the Christmas holidays there, and we worked under Gavin and Arlene over our Christmas holidays. They were away on holiday at the time. When they came back, Gavin said, "Are you interested in joining the mission?" And I said, "No, definitely not." And that night God spoke to me and said that both Diane and I are qualified in what our qualifications match what they're needing there. And the next morning I told Gavin that God seems to have changed my mind and that we will come and work there, and as soon as we sell our house. And at that stage I had been renovating houses for a few years and buying and selling, and our house had, when I moved into our house, I immediately put a for sale sign on and renovated it, and then when people gave me the price I wanted, I sold and bought another house. And just before that house, we had a house that I'd had for a week, made 7,000 Rand on it, and it was the way we operated. I was in the handyman business, and I told Gavin, this, when the house is sold, we will come up. We then left at midnight, New Year's Eve, for King Williamstown, to pick up my parents to move from King Williamstown to be with us. They were at the King Williamstown Children's Home with my sister there, and they were going to move down to PE. And when we arrived in King Williamstown, we had to tell my parents that we now on our way back to Dundee as soon as we can. And my mom said she knew God had told her that we would be moving back to Dundee. And anyway, we eventually got home. I think it was about the 3rd of January, and a new estate agent came along and said, "Do you mind if I put your house on my books?" And I said, "No, everybody else has got a house on their books, so it's fine." Brought a woman around, she bought a house cash, and the 15th of January we were back in Dundee after opening my business, finishing all the work for the previous year, and packing up, putting everything into a container, sending it all the way up to Dundee. We actually had to pack it into 2 containers, and when the driver came to pick up the second container, they were mobile containers. They were on wheels, not like the modern container. They came and picked up the second container, and he said I must come down immediately and pay, because they're wanting to load the containers that very evening and send it up. And I was hoping to give them like a post-dated check when our house was sold and they have the money through. I could pay for the moving. And when we arrived, all the money that I had made of all the work completed and that was in my back pocket, and the man at the counter demanded cash for our furniture to be moved to Dundee. I then pulled the money out, counted it all out, and I was 10 Rand short. And he said, "No, it's okay, you'll take a check for the 10 Rand. and that left us totally penniless and our furniture on its way to Dundee. When we were packing the container, the only thing that didn't fit into the container was my very, very long ladder. It was a 6.6 meter aluminium ladder that extended to 12 meters that I used to work on 3-story buildings with. And I was stuck with this ladder and everything else, tools, everything was loaded into the container. And I eventually managed to sell it to window and office cleaners in those days, and he paid me cash for it, and that gave me enough money to pay off my last staff member and enough petrol money to get us to Dundee. When we arrived in Dundee, we moved our furniture we had to go and manually fetch each thing. They wouldn't offload the containers in Dundee. We had to move it to the mission, and we had to pay contractors to move it for us. And when our furniture was in our house, we had 17 rand to our names in all. And I just think, when I think back on the times, God provided. We lived there for a year, sending Andrew, our eldest child, to pre-primary school, and David to play school, and we had to pay school fees, we had to pay petrol. We never went short with anything. God really supplied every day. We were like the first to pay with the school fees, and God really provided. When I think of God's name, Jehovah Jireh, God provides, and that is in advance, that the ladder didn't fit and everything just seemed to work according to his plan. And when we arrived, we didn't have to lend money from anybody. Everything was just according to God's plan. This was about the 18th of January or so, and we got stuck in and did the work. Diane was the nursing sister, come cook, come bookkeeper, come driver for the kids, come grocery buyer, come whatever was needed. And I did the handyman work with the residents, and we built 2 houses while we were there, or renovated, major renovations, 2 houses. It was almost a rebuild of 2 houses, and working with the residents, counselling, on the job counselling. We really enjoyed our stay up there. And in about April, I need to also say that we also went through hard times there, times where the tears flowed. And when we had got ourselves all sorted out and quite happy to stay, God, at the time of Mike had an accident in April. Diane's brother Mike had a major accident, and we rushed down to East London to be with him. We were told that he was brain dead on arrival at the hospital, and that the funeral would be very soon. So we rushed down, and he just seemed to survive, and eventually Diane's grand sent us a letter to say, how can we take care of the other people when we can't even take care of our own family, and that we need to come and nurse Diane's brother. And we just felt God had called us to Dundee, and he had led us and guided us. There'd been so many callings in the Bible, and that we had seemed to have followed and obeyed. And just when we thought, okay, this is definitely where God wants us, God said, okay, time to move back to PE and to start a mission very similar to what Mayana was all about. And that was another episode, all of it's on its own, that I asked for very, very clear guidance. And God seemed to lead us to Walmer Township, Port Elizabeth. And at that stage, Walmer Township, I did not know that Walmer Township existed. And for some reason, God seemed to keep this on our minds, and that this was the place and we need to move. And eventually we went and told Gavin, our leader, and cut a long story short, we eventually, on the 15th of December, we moved back to PE, basically to nurse Diane's brother. Eventually the day came when we were ready to move back to PE, and the railways came and picked up our furniture as the same way as we had moved up to Dundee. And I had to go and pay, and they said, what's the address in PE? And I said, no, I'll come back and tell you. We did not have an address to move to in PE. And the part in the Bible where God had called Abram, but he did not tell him where he was going, just came to mind. And eventually Diane's mother bought a house for Mike, and Mike moved into it, and we were able to give that address. We couldn't even move our furniture to my in-laws or my parents' house, because they both lived in flats and they didn't even have a garage to store our stuff in. And so we were really in a corner. And we were able to when we moved down, we were able to immediately move into a garage and 2 servants' room with our 3 children and Diane and myself. We had to bath and shower in the main house and eat in the main house, and that. And Diane worked for her brother for 18 months with no income, while I did the housework. Diane worked flat out day and night. Mike was in a lot of pain at that stage, and how they would have coped without Diane, I don't know. During this time, for some reason, God told me not to work, and I sat at home worrying about why I was sitting at home and not actually working. All it would have cost me was about 6 rand, put an advert in the paper and get back into business. As I was in handyman business before I went away to Dundee, but God kept on telling me not to work, and it was almost a weekly battle that I had to go through, thinking, no, I need to go out, get a job and get busy again. But God just kept on saying, don't work. And I just spent time in God's word, just spent time with God. And it was a very difficult time for us. We didn't lack anything. We had a main meal a day. We bought a loaf of bread for supper, and God really supplied during that time. Even though people said, the Bible says, if a man doesn't work, he shall not eat, and all that, and which I believe in. But God just said, do not work. And eventually, coming to the end of the year, Harvest School needed desks to be made, and I thought, well, at least I can work at home and make these desks and make just to keep myself busy. Actually went out, got a price on all the materials, and put a price in for materials only, no labor, and I lost the job. at a function at Harvest, I bumped into the person who did get the job, and I said, but what sort of price did you put in? And he said, well, he's from the some organization, and they get their materials free, and he put in a labor only price. And so it was just amazing how God just carried on supplying our needs and everything, even though we had not 1 cent coming in through work that I had done. And Diane wasn't being paid for this time. This went on for 18 months. And just one day I thought, I never use my electric sanding machine, the orbital sander, and I never use my belt sander, and I really should sell it. So I went to a friend and sold the 2 sanders, came home with a pocket full of money. I can't remember exactly now, about 700 rand. And Diane came rushing into the house and saying, Harvest says that you have to enroll the children by tomorrow, and we have to pay the deposit. I said, how much money would the deposit come to? And she said, it's about 700 rand. And I said, what would you say, how much money would you say if I told you I had money in my pocket? And God had just miraculously supplied minutes before we needed it, basically. And that was the first major need that we had that year. Everything else God had just supplied. And in that year we had to take the kids to school and everything. God supplied financially, and I did not lift a finger to do any work apart from spending time in God's Word. And Diane was, as I said, Diane was working for no money. And God, in all this time, God has really led us to work by faith, and God supplies our needs, and we have never ever had to question that. God has always supplied our needs. The beginning of 88, I started my handyman business again, and work started coming in and everything seemed to be fine. And God then said to me, I always had the question in my mind about why did I not work for that year, and God seemed to continuously tell me not to work. And he then said to me clearly that what would the Christians have said to Abraham, who went to sacrifice Isaac on the mountain? That's definitely not God's will, to sacrifice your child. And I think he just did it to prove that he could support us, and he really blessed us in that time. You almost feel guilty about receiving money and food, and you doing absolutely nothing for it. The period of coming back from the mission and starting our own mission took 9 years, and I think that's to do with when God gives you a vision, it takes a long time to germinate. We seem to be so involved, we thought we can't sit around doing nothing, so we started writing the mission rules and the constitution and all sorts of things like that, and we just knew that God has called us to this work. And the mission rules and constitution have since then had minor changes. It's almost from the time we wrote it years before we started the mission to now, it's almost still, everything's still the same. In 95 we went away to a farm in Adelaide, and just sharing the vision with a friend of ours, Robbie Morgan. He said he believes today is the day, and that we need to start the mission as soon as we get back home. And I went to our pastor, who was Sid Rothman at the time, and shared what God had laid on our hearts with the mission. And he said no, he feels that the time was right and that we need to go for it. And we just shared that it's actually a big vision, and that we wouldn't be able to fall under the church because we would be dealing with all the other churches as well, and like taking in people from Baptist, Methodist, Anglican and so on, and that the church wouldn't be able to really support Jerusalem Ministries in the way that we would need support. And so we started a non-profit organization called Jerusalem Ministries at that stage, and later it had a name change to Jerusalem Ministries. And I thought, I cannot carry on running my handyman business and running the mission at the same time. Both are full-time jobs, and I couldn't put drug addicts and alcoholics into people's houses to paint and fix and then expect them not to steal. And so I closed the handyman business down, started working full-time for the Lord, and just taking in one or two people, and eventually a year or two later we were running at 30 people in a 4-bedroomed house. And I'm hoping to show some slides of how the men fitted in on the dining room floor and lounge floor and so on, and with camping, stacking beds, and slept all over the place. We modified our little office to sleep 4 people. Then we eventually modified our garage to sleep 6 more people, and then we started picking up problems with the neighbors, and the neighbors really gave us major problems. And at one stage we didn't know which way to turn, and they eventually took us to the municipality, and the municipality said, okay, we need to get registered as the property needs to get registered as a mission, and we need permission, and we had to put adverts in the paper and all that. And then this just went on and on and on. I ended up in court cases with the municipality, and the municipality eventually told us that we can carry on for 6 more months, and then we have to close down, and that if we took in another person we would get handed over to the police. And the very next person that came in was brought in by the police. And when I told them the story, they said, so what must we do with this man? I said, no, let him come in. And that seemed to have been a major breakthrough in our lives as far as accommodation was concerned. I'm not sure if God saw my obedience or what the story was, but almost the next day the Methodist Church said that there's been a house has come available in Circular Drive, and they're wanting to give it to us to run from, and it won't be costing us any rent or anything like that. And we thought, wow, this must be God's answer to our prayers. And the neighbors still carried on with giving us appeal, and we asked the Woman Methodist Church to give us a letter just confirming the story, and which we gave to the municipality. And our neighbor then said she doesn't believe the Woman Methodist Church, and but as I say, the appeal didn't stop. And at almost at the same time, Brian Shea from White Lodge said that he would like to let us come stay at White Lodge and run a mission from White Lodge. And it was just talk at that stage, and that he wanted to give the owners, the residents who were staying here 2 months' notice. And when they got their notice, they said, no, it's okay, they're going to move out immediately. So we actually got both properties almost immediately, and the day we got Circular Drive, we were able to move in that day. All the doors had been stolen, all the plumbing had been stolen. Dan and I immediately moved in and started doing the plumbing, and got the residents to move beds over, and Diane and her mom started hanging curtains. And it was about lunchtime that we got the house, and that evening when the sun set, there was cold water in the toilets and the bath and the kitchen and so on. And the next morning we went and connected the hot water to the water supply to the geese, and the hot water to the taps and so on. The plumbing had been chopped out of the ground, so it was below the concrete level that we had to dig up and bring the water supply into the house. And well, that night, as I say, that the residents moved in, they had electricity, water supply and so on. And slowly after that we were able to get doors and hang doors and so on. And at the same time White Lodge became available, and we had to start moving into White Lodge, and the whole and I started painting Fordyce Road to put it on the market, our own house. And at that we were moving the furniture out of the house so that we had more space to paint, and a couple came in and bought the house as is, half painted. They said no, they want to do their own fancy painting, the stipple painting, and the exterior had to be their special type of paint that they wanted to do. So we were almost released to that job of completing the painting of that house, and we received the price that we wanted for it, and so everything seemed to just work according to God's plan. When we started Circular Drive, I sent Dan and Louis off to run Circular Drive and chop down trees and clean up and do all mainly in the garden because you could not move in the yard for guava trees. And Dan really seemed to pull through and become a leader, and eventually my closest friend. And well, I really thank the Lord for Dan, because he's been a shoulder to cry on when I've needed a shoulder to cry on. And then, as I say, Dan ran Circular Drive for almost probably 6 years or so, and that was tough, because at one stage I said, Dan, I'm really blessed, I'm really gifted in that I'm able to send you all my problem people. And that's what I used to do. Is anybody that misbehaved in the mission at White Lodge, I would send off to Dan, and they would live in Dan's bedroom, and they couldn't pull a move like they would at White Lodge. And so Dan would sit with all these problem people in his bedroom. Basically, there was a 2-bedroom house with 4 beds in each room, and was close fellowship basically, and men would either leave or come right. And there was also a lot of hard work with pulling out trees and gardening and chickens and muscovies, and we also farmed eggs at that stage when Dan was there. And so there was a lot of work that the men had to do. And as I say, Dan really pulled his weight there, and also a very close friend. Over the past 11 years we have taken in 1,620 men, Some stay a night, some stay a week, a month, a year, and our rules are that you can stay for 6 weeks, and then you need to find a job another 6 weeks, and then you would have saved up enough money to move out. But we only use those rules on people that are bone lazy and who won't pull their weight in any way, and we just say you've been here for 3 weeks and you've got another 3 weeks, and then you need to move out. But we've only really used that on one person, and but we normally my attitude or is that I like people to just come in, relax, calm down. I don't want to hear their story, because the story is normally that their wives have run off with their best friend or some story like that, and you never hear the truth until later. So once they've relaxed and calmed down and see that we're normal people and see that they're part of a family, I like them to feel part of it, that it's more of a family situation. And then we start working from there slowly and getting their lives back in order and their spiritual life in order. We have seen many people come through for the Lord and many people being baptized. We have a few success stories. A few years after we started at White Lodge, a friend of mine phoned me to say, do I want to buy a house? And if I want to buy a house, I must buy it now. It's a very urgent sale, and the bloke's only wanting 40,000 for the house. And I said, sorry, I don't have that sort of money, and not realizing that I almost had that sort of money in the bank. My mom had just passed away. We just sold Fordyce Road, and altogether I think we were about 2,000 rand short. And so it turned out when we had a meeting with the owner of the house that he actually wanted 50,000 for the house and not 40,000. So we said, sorry, we can't buy that, and unless and then one of the residents negotiated for us, and we bought the house for 40,000 rand. We managed to raise the other 2,000, and with the outstanding balance of 10,000 that he took a personal bond on the house for 10,000 rand that we could pay off over 6 months interest free. And the first payment I sent off, and the second payment, and from then on not another cent came into the mission. And right through till about 3 days before the 6 months were up, and I was able to pay him in full on the day of the 6 months. And I think it was just God saying that we, that He's in control. And when we bought the house, even though it was our money, both Diane and I felt that this is not the right thing to do. That we're buying this house with our money, but it's all in God's plan, and that we need to give the house to Jerusalem Ministries, which we did. And then, to cut a long story short about trying to get more property, as I said in the beginning, that God called us from Dundee to work into the Warmer Township, and nothing was really taking place, except that for the first, for going on 12 years now, I've been riding food into the township daily, or the mission has. I started off, but then the mission carried on running food into to Iris daily in the Warmer Township. And eventually the Boy Scouts property, Gill Sands, became available, and in the long negotiations they said that they wanted 1 million rand for the property, which was a, a bad dream to us, and we couldn't even think of 1 million rand. And they then accepted if we sold the North End house that we had bought, they would be happy to have the proceeds, which we estimated to be 120,000, and which was, to us, when we walked out of that meeting, we couldn't believe what we had just heard. And we eventually sold the house, paid them the money, and we now owe them 10,000 rand as a final figure on a property that must be worth 1 million rand. And for those who haven't seen it, it's a big hall and a double-story building on 4.4 hectares of land, and it's 1.7 kilometers from the 10th Avenue robots in Warmer. Over the past few years, we have run a few projects from what we call the Human Dignity Center, that was named by the people that we worked with in the Warmer Township. At the moment, we're running a creche and aftercare and an AIDS support group, but we were running at one stage a adult training school called Kwasa, meaning, oh, now I see it, or now I understand. It has really been amazing how God has fulfilled the vision that He gave us in 1986. That even though I need to explain that vision to you, that I woke up one morning not knowing if it was a dream or if it was a vision. It came as a flash, and I felt God give me this picture of Jerusalem Ministries and the type of work that we would be doing, and it was almost a picture of heaven. You know, people see a vision of heaven, and they say that the streets were paved in gold and all that sort of thing, and this was almost like the vision. It was like too big to like understand. It was like a never-ending thing, and I woke up and told Diane the vision that I had got of Jerusalem Ministries, and explained to her that it was like a big thing. As I say, we are feeding almost 50 residents and 70 children daily, and running projects. Our turnover a month is about 50,000, and I just stand back amazed and saying, where does this come from? Where does the money come from to feed these people? You know, just taking in one border into your house, it costs money, you know, and when you're feeding people on a daily basis, and you just need more and more money, and yet for some reason everything seems to flow, the money is supplied. I remember sitting at the supper table one night and just thinking, you men, you've got no idea where this food is coming from. Because I don't. And yet God just carries on supplying and supplying and supplying. If we run out of this, He supplies it. If we run out of that, He supplies it. And so it goes. And we have never had to beg for finance sending people out onto the streets or anything like that. God has always just supplied what we've needed. God has told, part of the vision is that we need to start a farm, and that's we personally used to farm in 1980. Yeah, no, about 1982, I think we had a farm, or 1980, I think. And I've always felt that I would really love to go back into farming, and I think chicken's healthy, but when you have chicken 7 days a week, it gets a bit much, and I really feel that a lot of the people we take in aren't capable of going to work in the commercial world again, working for a boss, and because of sometimes brain damage or the brain damage that drugs have caused, and being on a farm, and they could work in a specific field of either dairy or chickens or looking after animals or doing vegetable farming, that would be the way to go, and I'm sure God will supply a farm one day. Another part of the vision that God has seemed to have extended our vision is going into Africa, and maybe with agricultural school, we don't know what God's plan is there, but I know that God has really called us to Africa. I don't know when or where or how. Personally, we've been to Malawi and Zimbabwe and have really enjoyed it, really felt on a major spiritual high, especially in Malawi. But I've got no idea what God's calling us to.